And now, the First Alert Storm Team, live from the 13 Now Digital Desk. This is Tropic Topics, sponsored by Peden Heating and Air Conditioning and Mariana Toyota.
Welcome to Tropic Topics, and this is week 7. Hard to believe that we're already 7 weeks in to all tropical season. We've got a long way to go there. We're just getting started. Oh boy. Well, this is a fun week because we are doing mainly explainers. There's not a whole lot going on. This is happiness, at least from us. We are very happy to be talking about a whole lot of nothing. There is one little system out there. We'll get to that in just a second, but we're going to mainly be focusing on Saharan dust this time around. And if you watched our sister program from Tampa, Tracking the Tropics yesterday, they covered a lot of the Saharan dust stuff too. But we're going to try to give you a little more in-depth information and some graphics along with it for some talking points as well. So it should be a fairly quick show, but it's going to be fun. We're going to have some good times. And if you haven't gotten in on the hashtag contest for this week, because we are talking about Saharan dust, I thought it would be fun to do any mummy quotes from the movie The Mummy. And if you haven't seen it, I would suggest going and watching it. It is a cult classic. Not a whole lot of science involved in it, but
a lot of cool animation.
But it is a fun movie, and yeah, it had some good CGI, especially for its time. Jeez, we've got someone that's never seen it. So
Grace has homework tonight.
I even had somebody on Facebook say that looks like a face in the dust eating a plane, and I was like, yeah, that's because it is. It's from the movie. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, go watch it. If you don't know the movie, you can also join in on the hashtag contest by doing anything related to dust. So I think
another one bites the dust.
Yes, I saw that. Somebody did do a hashtag, another one bites the Saharan dust.
Okay.
And I was like, that's pretty good. I like that one. So we will get to that. That's going to be the last thing we do. So you have time. If you want to put that hashtag in the comment section wherever you're watching this, go for it. We have my feed up. We have the WBB feed up on Facebook there as well. So if you put it in the comment section, we'll see it. And if you have a question throughout the show, feel free to put it in the comment section as well. You can hashtag it, hey Grace, hey Ross, hey Kristen, and then that way we know who you are talking to specifically if you want to talk to one of us. Let's jump right in. Let's get right to it. Let's talk about the setup of what is currently going on. So this is the National Hurricane Center's suggestion that there could be a development of a depression off of the Atlantic coast. Specifically, it's from a stalled boundary, and you see that boundary pretty easily there with the infrared satellite picture up. Notice where the cloud cover is, that's where the boundary is. There is a big old tut low hanging out there to the south as well. That's creating shear at the moment, but that should continue to sink off to the south and east, and as it does, that environment will become at least marginally favorable for development. When we say development, we don't mean a tropical storm. We don't mean a hurricane. We mean tropical depression. So that literally means a surface low over the Atlantic. And we get
water.
Yeah, over the water. That's it. So there's, two scenarios here. Basically, if this doesn't develop, this becomes added moisture for us as we get into Tuesday and Wednesday of next week. If it does develop, it's just a Gulf Stream runner. And what is the next name? Did you look it up?
It's Fred.
It's Fred.
Yep.
Oh, so you were right.
I was.
So the next name is Fred.
And then it's Grace.
Yeah.
Fred and then Grace. Let's hope it's not the perfect storm, Grace.
It's not.
Because if you guys rehashing history here, the original perfect storm was not Sandy, it was Hurricane Grace, which became extratropical, and there's been several books that were written about it because it produced like 100-foot waves off the coast of New England.
That's also how Grace got her name.
Is it? Is that how you were named? Or is
No,
this, where's our sarcasm here? Let's go ahead, put up one for the sarcasm there. Quote to Kristen.
I
Yes.
was born in a blizzard, not really the same thing.
Ooh,
but,
unrelated, but
no pressure.
There you go.
Oh boy, so this is the GFS's depiction of what could be happening as we go through the next couple of days. And again, a 30% chance here. The colors representing shear, and where I have circled, that is the Gulf Stream. So if we're going to see development, it's going to happen over the Gulf Stream. That's where the waters are the warmest. That's also where you're getting some baroclinic support. Baroclinic just meaning temperature change. So where you have the temperature change and your upper level support, basically kind of coinciding, tongue-tied, over the Gulf Stream. So as we get into Saturday and Sunday, that's when we potentially could see something develop, and you'll notice it right there. Actually, the circle a little bit off, but it doesn't really matter because it's the same kind of thing. It moves up the Gulf Stream and out to sea. So regardless of whether we get FRED or not, this isn't an issue. And again, if it doesn't develop, then we've got added moisture next week. So that's really the scenario here. And you'll also notice there's plenty of shear out there. We're talking about where you see those reds over the Caribbean. It's why it is referred to as the graveyard of this time of year, because tropical systems can develop in the main development region in the Atlantic, and then they run to the Caribbean, they hit that shear, and it is donezo. So this is more of our typical setup for July and August. Really, we're basically showing the pattern that should be out there. So as opposed to what we had in June, which was a pattern that looked much more like September, which is why it was so active. So kind of different, and good to see that we are back to normal and back to what we should be. So let's go with what's going on out there. And Kristen, you want to walk us through this?
Sure. So what we currently have is that big subtropical high, of course, that's off towards our east and also towards the north, kind of acting as a steering direction. We don't have a lot going on out there, looking off the coast of West Africa and shifting towards the west. That's just the general trend of where these waves would be moving into, or and where they would be heading. And it's just not a lot going on out there. It's really quiet. We don't have any of real tropical waves, maybe a little bit of disturbances, but they're not expected to really have many impacts because we have a lot of dust out there, which will segue that.
Yeah, that's
well, at least dry air.
Yes.
How about that?
Yeah, dust, dry air,
Yeah.
kind of all one and the same here. So as Kristen pointed out, monsoon trough, pretty easily picked out there by, again, the cloud cover. Where there's moisture, that's where the trough is, and everything you see that's orange.
That's a lot of orange.
That's a lot of orange.
We
It's
love
dry.
to see that orange.
We do. Orange is good news, and it's good news. Why, Grace?
Because that means no hurricanes or no development.
Dry air.
Dry air. That is it. So we've got a whole lot of dry air. We got a whole lot of dust, and we're gonna have Grace walk us through the dust.
The dust. All right, so here's our current dust forecast, and through the next few days or so, it's going to look pretty much the same. We have tons and tons of dust coming off that coast of West Africa. Saharan dust, you know, obviously the Saharan desert, that's where it comes from. That's why it gets its name. Heading into Monday, Tuesday of next week, going to be pretty widespread and also very dense as it heads over the Caribbean and even over towards southern ends of the United States. This is going to create very suppressive, we're already in a suppressive pattern as we talked about the MJO, I think 2 weeks ago or last week.
Yes.
It all blurs together.
Yes,
but,
2 weeks ago.
So we're in that suppressive phase. We do have lots of westerly winds. You know, that's what takes those tropical waves off the west coast of Africa and traverses them over towards the Caribbean. And that's kind of, you know, where we look for that development just a little bit north of the equator there. But if you have dust in place, if you have a suppressive phase of the MJO in place, if you have shear in place, if you have all these things in place, which we do, you're really not going to see much in the way of development. There will be some tropical activity, you know, along the equator, which we do see, but it's really just going to slowly make its way towards the west, and you know, all that dry air and dust is really going to inhibit those systems from being able to develop, and also going to slightly cool down those temperatures for the water. This time of year is when we do see those water temperatures start to really increase pretty rapidly, but all that dust out there slightly blocks out the sun, only slightly. You can't really notice it. I know we have had a lot of smoke from the western wildfires kind of making their way over towards the east end of the United States, and you probably have seen, you know, sunset pictures where it's just this big ball of orange because there's so much haze in the air. It's kind of similar to that, but even less noticeable, I would say. But there still is a ton of dry air and dust, you know, just much more widespread and over a much bigger area of the Earth. So it's going to block out a little bit of the sunlight, make things just a little bit cooler, so storms will be inhibited from development, and the dry air as well is just kind of a suffocation, I guess, for those types of storms that, you know, are trying to make their way westward, but not really able to take advantage of any of the, you know, good factors out there that would be feeding any storms. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So as Grace pointed out, dust does a lot of good for us, especially if you don't want tropical activity. Helps to cool the water off. It helps to choke out any system that is trying to develop, because systems need not only warm water temperatures, but they need low shear and they need moist air. If you don't have a high relative humidity over the water, then that air that is rising off of warm water has nowhere to go and it dissipates. So that is the good news about dry air. So that's why we love to see dust. That's why we love to see shear, and why we love to see dry air over the Atlantic. And the longer we can hold on to that, the better, because we do know that the dust doesn't last forever. Unfortunately, as we get into late August and into September, that is when we usually cut off the supply of dust off of the coast of Africa. And that's really has to do with the fact that the subtropical high ends up being a little bit further off to the west, and our monsoon trough starts to become a little less active over Africa and starts to become a little more active right on the Cape, so near the coastline, and that's no bueno. We want the stuff to be throwing dust into the Atlantic, not just developing as it comes off of the coast of Africa, because that's when we start to get those long runners. So dust versus a weak system. Kristen, why don't you walk us through this?
This is kind of similar to that very weak system we have trying to develop off of the East Coast right now. Say you have just a tropical low, which is a broad area of low pressure over the ocean or a warm body of water. When you have drier air coming into it, as we've mentioned, dry air is not good. It's going to feed into it and somewhat kind of rip it apart and really inhibit it from developing. It's definitely not what the hurricane or tropical system wants at all. It's what we want. We don't want anything to develop. So that dry air and dust will actually work to keep it from sustaining any more significant potential to develop. It's going to mainly keep it as a weak system, or even just cause it to completely dissipate, depending on how much dust, how much dry air is actually being sucked in, whether or not there's any forward movement with it. If it's a stagnant storm, then it's most likely going to be eaten apart by that dust and dry air. If there's a little bit more motion with it, it'll certainly work to weaken it before any potential for redevelopment to occur. But most of the time we just have a developing tropical system that is very weak. It's not really, I mean, like not even really a tropical depression most of the time. Even if it is a tropical depression, I mean, it could still do a really good job at weakening that system and keeping it from getting stronger, because dry air is not an ingredient that these tropical systems thrive off of. They usually weaken, they dissipate, and they get ripped apart. So the good news is, with a weaker system, if there's dry air in place, it's not going to do, the system itself is not going to do much. It's not going to pose as much of a threat because it's likely not going to be strengthening. However, if it's a larger system or even a more mature system, then it has a little bit different impacts.
Yeah, absolutely. When there's a larger system that is moving into dry air, as is typical as we go through August, if we do get something to develop and then it runs into the Caribbean, or there's dry air in place ahead of it. We just saw this in the Eastern Pacific, actually, or in the Pacific rather, with Felicia, right? Well, it was Felicia. There was a very strong system. It went from actually a tropical storm all the way up to a major hurricane in less than 48 hours. So rapidly intensified, and then it ran into dry air. And for a while, it sustained itself because it was fighting off that dry air, and it was really being able to continue to moisten its environment around the storm, so it was able to hold on for a couple of days. In fact, I saw one statistic that showed Felicia had the driest environment around it than any other statistical storm in the past, and it was still a major hurricane. Now, it didn't last because Felicia was a very, very small storm. While it was strong and was able to create its own environment around it, eventually that dry air did get into the system. And basically what happens is, really, once that dry air gets into the southwest quadrant, that's where the inflow of moist air has to be, because that is the quadrant that really pulls into the center of the storm. So once dry air's in that southwest quadrant, that's when you start to get that dry air get into the center of the storm. And we've seen examples of this in the past, say even Katrina. Katrina was a really big storm, but eventually some dry air of continental air came out of the north and west, got into that southwest quadrant, and we saw Katrina, as it was moving ashore, really expand that inner eye wall and start to weaken. So Katrina was a Category 5 in the middle of the Gulf, but made landfall as a Category 3 and a pretty rapidly weakening Category 3. And the biggest issues with Katrina were flooding and storm surge. That was created over the Gulf. It wasn't really the wind, with exception to the eastern eye wall, which we talked about in the quadrants last week, and where the strongest systems would, or strongest part of the system would be. But that dry air gets into it and really starts to work apart the core of that storm. So stronger, bigger systems can battle dust, but they still don't like it. It can sustain for a while, but if it continues to go into the storm, eventually that is going to work on that system and tear it apart, or just weaken it and broaden it entirely to make it a less significant system overall. There still could be strong quadrants of the storm, but we're going to be talking about a weaker storm overall. And this is pretty applicable, right? Is that
applicable?
Applicable. There we go.
Applicable?
Applicable, yes. Anyways, that does apply to our overall weather on the U.S. as well. Whenever we have dry air in place, and we saw the underperforming atmosphere yesterday, that was because some dry air, thanks to the high pressure system that's in control today, was sliding into the mid-levels. So this is the same kind of thing. As your warm air starts to rise, it hits that dry air that's aloft, and it can't continue to rise because the air is too dry. So then it just stops. It either starts to fade and dissipate, or it just goes away completely. And we saw that yesterday. Showers and storms through the morning, pretty active morning, and then held on to the activity along I-10 as we got into the middle of the afternoon. But eventually that mid-level dry air went out, and we saw more sunshine. And dry air, unlike water, when you have a lot of water in the air, dry air heats up quickly. It also cools down quickly. Part of the reason why we're talking about such warm temperatures as well as we go forward is due to the fact that we're going to have just a little bit of dry air to help us out to enhance those temperatures. So let's bring it back to a 3-screen here, and we're going to go into, if we don't have any questions here, I'm going to see if I can see any questions. What's the question?
Do you see any?
Okay. Yeah, I mean, Sandy Davenport asked a question that says, how many years do you think it will be until we get another bad hurricane? That's a good question. You know, typically our return period for tropical weather is about once every 3 years. That means that we're going to see a hurricane about once every 3 years here. And that is a Gulf Coast return period too. So most locations along the Gulf Coast have a return period of about 1 to 3 or 1 to 5, meaning that there is a tropical system affecting the area every 3 years or every 5 years, somewhere in between that. The highest return period is actually around Miami. They have a return period of about 1 every 2 years, and their highest return period of a major hurricane, also Miami, is 1 every 16 years. So here in the Panhandle, our return period for major hurricanes is once every 20 years. And that makes sense. If you go back and you think about landfalling hurricanes, major hurricanes, in the Panhandle. If you go back from Michael, the previous one is probably Dennis, which was 2004, and Dennis was not really in the Panhandle, it was off to our west. And then if you go back before that, right, but again, that wasn't in the Panhandle, it was to our west. So if you go back to before that, then you had Opal, and Opal was in, I'm forgetting the year. But anyways, it's about once every 20 years if you go back on major hurricanes from our area and when we have a landfalling system in the Panhandle. So odds are odds. And that's a good thing to look at, and it's a good way to comfort yourself as to when systems will be coming in, or when we're going to be overdue, or if we're, if we're not due at all. But odds don't really mean anything, because if you go way back and you look at the 1800s, so the 1890s, we had 3 major hurricanes make landfall and where Panama City is now today within a 10-year period. So odds are that we won't see one for another 10 to 15 years, a major hurricane in the Panhandle. But, odds can be deceiving, because, a once in a 500-year flood just means that it happens, or that you have the odds of once in every 500 years. Well, that odd is the same next year as well. So you could just be unlucky and hit on that 2% chance 2 or 3 years in a row. So, I would be comforted in the fact that it's unlikely we will see a major hurricane anytime soon, but at the same time, our odds are exactly the same as they were in 2018.
Well, it's all just like knock on wood for that,
Exactly.
Every time you talk about it, I feel like you got to do something.
Well, the odds don't change just because we're talking about it, but yes. So
let's not speak it into existence.
Yes, I'm with you, but I'm just saying the chances are we probably won't be talking about a major hurricane impacting our area anytime soon. Now, obviously, let's see, we had Sally last year, didn't make landfall in the Panhandle. And the year before that, were affected by Marco. Well, that was last year too. Opal was 95, so that was about on the nose then for 20 years. So yeah, that's kind of the way that things work. So, but anyways, once every 3 years. So chances are we'll have a hurricane either this year or next year or the following year, but chances are it won't be a major hurricane. That's just kind of the way the odds work, but we'll see. Regardless, we could also go 10, 15 years without having a hurricane. I mean, we had a hyperactive season in 2005, and then we didn't have another major hurricane make landfall until 2014? 2015. No, 2014. So there wasn't another major landfall from a hurricane in the U.S. until 2014. And then, of course, we caught up last year because we had 9 landfalling systems last year, and 5 of them were majors. So, so we caught up last year. So hopefully we're done for a while. I would bet that things will get pretty active as we get into September and October. Things look set up pretty favorably for this season, that we'll have a pretty active season, especially, in my opinion, toward the end of the season, which would be, the tail end of September and October. I think we're going to be pretty active, but that doesn't mean we'll be impacted. So good question. Did you all see any other questions that were there?
Nope, did not see any.
No other questions? Do we have any questions on MBB?
Nope.
Oh, that's a good question. I got one here too. Kristen, how about you take this one? It says, how does smoke enhance or hinder thunderstorm development? Very hazy in North Carolina today. So good question there from Michael McGuire.
Well, that's a great question. You have to ask me. At the dead end of my shift attire.
Oh, the brain's not working, is it?
Well, it's kind of similar in a sense to how it inhibits development as a tropical system, but at the same time, it can also act as an additional contingency for water droplets to form on, so you can sometimes get more cloud cover from that system. That can sometimes also then result in more shower and thunderstorm development. So it kind of depends on what else is going on in the atmosphere compared to just the smoke and the haze in and of itself. It's either going to, it could suppress it, or it could also add to a little bit more development. Now, I think most of the time when you have the smoke and the haze in place, you're not typically seeing a lot of shower and thunderstorm activity, at least in some of the areas that I've been in that has also had very smoky and hazy conditions, but it is very dependent on what else is going on. Is that kind of like
I think that was
in my science brain that I had to dig deep. Yeah.
I think that was pretty good. Yeah. I think you hit it, because really you could be talking about it being an enhancement for dry air, or we could be talking about it being a nucleation particle. So
there
something.
You go. That was what I was looking for.
Yeah. The Bergeron process. If you think back.
That was my book.
You think back to.
I'll explain the process. I can't find the word for it.
If you think back to your college days there, the Bergeron process. If you're wondering what we're talking about, we are talking about clouds and how they form. So if you have any questions on that, you can Google it.
I want to say that my mom just sent me an article of someone creating their own rain in the Midwest. I don't know. Never mind. Just ignore
From
that.
dust?
No, like a different country went and like put their own stuff in the sky to make their own rain because they've had extreme heat.
So are you talking about like
Like they
silver
created their
iodine?
own,
Like
like-
they were
They
cloud
tried to do
seeding?
that in the Olympics when it was in China. They tried to put a bunch of dust up into the atmosphere so it wouldn't rain
I think so,
during the
yeah.
ceremony.
I
Another
think so.
country literally just kind of did this because
Weather
they've been dealing
Control.
with such
It's
a
possible.
Yeah, well, weather modification is more like it. It's not. it's not
not
really control,
Control.
because our environment is really, really chaotic. So chances are that we're not going to be able to control every aspect of it. But weather modification isn't new. I mean, if you think about heat island effects from cities, volcanoes create their own weather when they're releasing water vapor and ash into the atmosphere, and we're even seeing it out west right now with the wildfires. They create their own weather as well because they're releasing so much heat into the atmosphere they can even create dry thunderstorms. And that's part of why we have so much haze across the North America in general, is because of the wildfires in the west and the wildfires in Canada. So those two things are really what creates that. But yeah, weather modification, not really weather control. So let's wrap things up here. I don't see many more questions, but that was a good question there.
Talk about next week?
Next week, yes, actually, we have some exciting adventure for next week. We are going to be talking to a hurricane hunter, and Kristen will not be with us.
I will not, sorry.
It'll be me and Grace, and
You guys can have fun.
We're gonna have a great time. So if you have any questions you want us to ask the hurricane hunter, please submit it to us. You can do it in the comment section where you're watching right now, or you can send us questions. Do we have an email set up for us? We're just going to do news.
No, on Tropic Topics. Let's do news.
Let's just do news. Okay, you can email us at news@wmbb.com. So that's just news@wmbb.com. That's world's most beautiful beaches. wmbb.com. So there you go.
Or shoot us a message on Twitter, Facebook, any of those.
Yeah, you
Wherever
can do that
you're
too.
watching or whatever.
That's right. You can do that too. So yeah, we're going to be talking to a hurricane hunter next week live, so you don't want to miss that. So join us. And of course, we'll also be going over whatever's going on out there. And from the outlook as of right now, that doesn't look like much. So yeah. All right, let's wrap up.
Let's wrap this up, Spencer.
On our
Spencer,
we've got
show
one.
the things you have.
We've
Spencer.
got one more thing to do, Kristen. I know you want to go home.
No, what's your one thing? I know something.
We
else
have to do our hashtag contest.
There's also another surprise
What's the other
that
surprise?
I was told about that you weren't.
Kick off the hashtags.
We'll do the hashtags first.
I wasn't told about it. Oh my gosh.
What is that?
The movie Sahara, right?
Yes, I do. Oh man.
This is a good one.
Oh,
Oh my gosh, I'm in
goodness.
the plane.
Oh
These are
boy.
hilarious.
That's pretty good. I think you could have done a little better job with cropping my face in there.
You didn't have much time.
But yeah, I mean, I look like my head is shrunk
Grace,
or
you look so
something.
noble.
Yeah.
I do. I look like I really know how to fly a plane. Especially through a dust storm, a monster dust storm.
Oh boy. Oh man.
All right, now into the hashtag.
Okie doke. I think we'll just number these and then we'll vote between the four of us here on the hashtags that I got submitted. Let's start off with hashtag Eat My Dust from Roger Jones.
Okay.
I don't not like that.
Let's just hear the other ones and then we can.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one too. Orange, you tired of rain? Yeah.
Oh, that's a good
Orange,
one
you
too.
tired of rain?
I like that one too.
That one's not bad. Our very own Courtney Mims is very persistent into trying to win this contest. She has submitted every week, so all of you out there watching, you got to step up your game. She went with the Disney theme a little. It is faith and trust and a little bit of Saharan dust.
I think that's the one I like.
That's a pretty good
Very
one there.
creative.
And then I already mentioned it at the beginning of the show. We have Pamela Smithson with Another One Bites the Saharan Dust. So that was a good one too. Well, let's see.
I dropped one
Next
in your
week.
comments, Ross.
You dropped one in my comments. Let's go back to the comments. Dust in the spin. Dust in the spin. Okay, a little play on.
That's the one.
A little play on tropical activity. Yeah, that's pretty good. Let's see. I'm trying to catch up on any questions that I may have missed. Everyone's just talking about Brendan Fraser now.
Yeah.
That's all I see. Okay. Yeah. All right. So which one? Which one are we going with? We
I
going
like the
with?
Tinkerbell one.
We going with another one? Another one bites the Saharan dust, or faith and trust and a little bit of Saharan dust, or eat my dust, and then we also have Spencer's entry, which is dust in the
orange
spin.
one.
Oh yeah,
Orange
orange you
red.
tired of rain. Orange you
I
tired
kind
of
of really
rain.
like that one.
You like orange you tired of rain?
Because it's different.
It is very it's very on the nose for this
As,
weather
I mean, I
pattern
think we're
we've been
also
in.
all very tired of the rain too.
Okay, are we in agreement?
Sure.
Grace is
going
like,
with-
yeah, whatever.
We're going, Grace, get excited, okay?
Or we can do
excited.
another one. What was Eat My Dust?
It was eat my dust. Yep.
They're all just so like good.
Yeah.
Pick one, Ross. You're the chief here. Make the initial
It's hard
decision.
to pick a winner like when you're, on the spot.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm
should've gone over this
gonna
earlier.
set the bar really high for Courtney and say that if she wants to win, because
She's gotta
Courtney already
do-
gets enough airtime. If she
gotta
wants
do
to win,
more.
she's got to be like supreme better
Yeah,
than
that-
everybody else.
yeah.
Because Courtney's on air. I mean, she already has plenty of time in here. So we're gonna throw Courtney's out.
Yes. throw it
And-
out, toss it.
We toss. We are gonna go with Orange You Tired of Rain. Yes. Little applause. Can we get the applause?
There we go.
There it is.
So who submitted that?
That is Heather Shelby.
Congrats, Heather Shelby.
Heather Shelby, congratulations. We really need to come up with something
You just win a
that you actually win.
congratulations.
But yeah, you just win a congrats.
Shout out. Whoop, whoop.
Yeah.
Congrats. So congrats. All right. So we got one for the sarcasm meter. That was Kristen. And
Are you surprised?
No, I'm not. I think Kristen's probably going to win the sarcasm contest by the end of this year. And maybe we do disinterested looks, because I think Grace might
is
win that
probably
one.
gonna win all that.
Come on.
And
Well,
we're gonna
is
do
that
all
sarcasm? Oh, I think we've tied now.
All the corny jokes for this one. Over
Yeah,
there.
that's all me. Okay, let's wrap it up. That is week 7, and that is all dust. If you missed anything, you can check it back out here. You can watch that. If you don't have the Storm Track 13 app, download it. You're missing out. There's plenty of good information on there. If you're having any issues with the Storm Track 13 app, you can definitely contact us, and we are hopeful to have a video out of doing an explainer of the
Ins and
app
outs.
and all of the fancy tools that it has, because I can promise you, even if you are an avid user of it, you probably don't know everything that is going on there and things that you can do. So we are hopeful to do that here relatively soon and have that out to you. But yeah, the Storm Track 13 app, that's where it's at. Thanks to our sponsors as well for making this possible. And again, join us next week. We're going to be talking to a hurricane hunter, and by we, I mean Grace and I.
Okay, you can still watch on my page too.
We're going to be talking to a hurricane hunter. We'll be going over current setup and stuff that's going out next week as well. So until then, be good, y'all.